Amendment by Menéndez.
Chair recognizes Representative Menéndez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill speaks to the psychological. House Bill 2 provides for an abortion up to the 28th week mark. It makes no exceptions beyond that point other than the mother's life is threatened. There is no exception for a situation in which the mother's life is threatened by her own decision to stop psychotropic medications that may pose a risk to the fetus, but with such posing such a serious risk of suicide or self-harm by the mother because of a pre-existing mental health condition. That same threat exists from post-traumatic stress disorder that may result from either a rape or even incidents of incest. PTSD has been long established to manifest itself at times well after the event. Because PTSD is recognized as a highly disabling illness disorder to the extent that it can cause acute disabilities. So members, what I think is here that a pregnancy that's a result of sexual abuse, incest, has a debilitating side, a result of PTSD. So post-traumatic stress disorder is a serious health condition that does not follow a medical clock like a pregnancy does. So the 20-week limit fails to recognize that fact or at all the other dangers such as the condition that could pose to the woman or even the public if in spite of medical opinion of her doctor, the woman is forced by this legislation to carry the full term. What this amendment simply does, it recognizes what we have already acknowledged for disabled veterans and others with PTSD, as especially qualifying mental illness should be applied to this legislation, recognizing that there is no specific clock running on this medical condition. Additionally, the amendment will recognize that certain types of psychotropic medications being prescribed for a pre-existing mental health condition may pose a severe risk to the fetus that continues towards delivery. But it's reasonable medical judgment of the physician that the causative condition may pose an equally high risk of self-inflicted harm or even suicide by the mother if the drugs are discontinued for a sustained period of time. In both cases, the amendment stresses, just as this bill does, the reasonable medical judgment of the attending physician. So members, I would hope that we, as a compassionate body of elected officials, would not fail to recognize that there are reasonable medical circumstances that no legislation can categorize or even reasonably define that are more accurate and personally directed than a doctor's in cases such as I've described. Members, we heard testimony in committee from a lady who was on psychotropic medication who said her medication was known to cause birth defects, and that if she became pregnant, she would have to choose between her own mental health and stability or the health of the baby. So members, I think that this amendment that would bring into consideration a woman's psychological condition and the reply to is the woman's mental status to present a possibility of self-harm or suicide as detected by her doctor, and this is for the discontinuation of psychotropic medications prescribed for a pre-existing psychological condition. Psychological conditions are just as important as health conditions, and so I hope that the author sees that we could adopt this because we should consider women's health, both their mental and their physical health. And I do yield for questions.
Mr. Reynolds?
Madam Speaker, I raise a point of order against further consideration of HB2 under Rule 4, Subsection 32, Section C.
Bring your point of order down front. Representative Reynolds raises a point of order under Rule 4, Section 32C. The point of order is respectfully overruled. We are back to the Menéndez amendment. Chair recognizes Representative Menéndez. You were still in the middle. I think there is a question.
Move adoption.
Ms. Farrar, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Does the gentleman yield?
Of course.
He yields.
Mr. Menéndez, in the bill on page 5, line 8, this bill specifically rules out in its exceptions the possibility of the consideration of psychological conditions. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am, and I think it's one of the bill's shortcomings among many others, but not to recognize a woman's psychological health is, in essence, saying that psychological health is not equivalent to your physical health. And we all know that some people can become suicidal, and if someone is on medication for a pre-existing psychological condition, and that has them stabilized, and they already have a family, are we saying that their existing family is not as important as the one that they possibly might bring into this world, or that the mother is not as important? I think that it's a crime not to acknowledge a woman's psychological health as being as important as her physical health.
I appreciate you saying that, because that has been a concern, and we did hear testimony about that, about women, and that's why these issues are so difficult, because you do, I don't know if you heard the testimony as well, but there was a woman who was concerned about her other children.
Correct.
You did hear that testimony?
Yes, absolutely. And she's on medication that has her stabilized. It's allowed her to be a good mom. And what would happen if she became pregnant and then the medication she's on would potentially harm the fetus? She'd have to choose between the safety and well-being of the baby she'd be carrying or the children she already has. And that, I think, is not a decision that we should be legislating, that there is absolutely no area that she and her doctor and her God should be dictating, should be deliberating in a very serious capacity. We, in essence, are just saying that her mental health is not important.
Right, and this is, even your amendment is still pretty narrow. I mean, you're dealing with psychotropic medications, and you're dealing with PTSD as a result of rape or incest, correct?
Correct.
So even then, I mean, my criticism of the amendment would be that it should allow for severe postpartum depression and other conditions. But I think, I mean, if you can get these two, I think it certainly makes the bill better.
Well, you know, and
Representative Taylor raised the point of order. The gentleman's time has expired. The point of order is well taken and sustained. The chair recognizes Representative Laubenberg in opposition.
Madam Chair, respectfully, I do also move to table this amendment. The physical health exception is in the bill, and it is a very immediate situation. They can be determined, immediately. And mental health is a very serious issue. And a woman can feel good one day and be down the next day. And to make a decision in that state could be a decision that she could later regret. Right now, for 5 months, a woman can have an abortion for any reason for 5 months. But again, I bring it back to the fact that at 5 months and beyond, we are now looking at a well-developed preborn child who will feel the pain of that abortion. Thank you. I move the table.
Representative Menéndez, close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very quickly, all I'm doing in this amendment is adding that this is specifically from the amendment, if in the physician's reasonable medical judgment, number one, the psychological condition is a post-traumatic stress disorder caused by rape or an incestuous relationship forced on the woman that manifests itself after the 20-week period, or two, that the discontinuation of her psychotropic medications prescribed for a pre-existing psychological condition because of the potential side effects, risk of the medications to the fetus would have such a debilitating effect on the woman's mental state as to present the possibility of self-harm or suicide. I think that's pretty serious, and I appreciate your attention, and I would hope that you vote against the motion to table. Thank you.
Representative Menéndez sends up an amendment. Representative Laubenberg moves to table. The vote is on the motion to table. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Laubenberg voting aye. Show Representative Guerin voting aye. Show Representative Burkett voting aye. Show Representative Linda Harper-Brown voting aye. Show Representative... Have all voted. Have all voted. Show Representative Dukes voting no. Have all members voted? There being 91 ayes, 53 nays, the motion to table prevails.